spectacular light shows, dangerously high waters, and deadly damaging wind. Southwest Virginia is no stranger to severe weather.
Storms this time of year are likely to do significant damage in a variety of ways, and your Pinpoint Weather meteorologists are here to make sure you're ready for anything.
In the next half hour, we'll tackle several types of storms, from torrential downpours and flood-covered streets to tornadoes, derechos, and how you can prepare. This is Safety in the Storm.
And now, a Pinpoint Weather special presentation. Learn how a derecho forms, what to do in a lightning storm, the area's history of tornadoes, and how you can stay prepared. Safety in the Storm on WFXR.
Hello, and thank you for tuning in to Safety in the Storm. I'm Chief Meteorologist John Carroll.
And I'm Meteorologist Kara Thompson. Well, today marks the start of Severe Weather Awareness Week here in Virginia. It aims to improve our readiness ahead of the severe weather season.
Yeah, there are a number of weather events that can be classified as dangerous and intense, but this show is focusing on flooding, tornadoes, lightning, and even derechos.
But first, it's important to know what you need to look for before severe weather arrives.
A thunderstorm is defined as a rain-bearing cloud that produces lightning. All are very dangerous as they are capable of producing a variety of impactful and possibly deadly events in addition to the lightning, which kills dozens of people each year. But events like flooding, flash flooding, hail, gusty winds, and tornadoes are all possible once the storm develops. Now, there are parameters that the National Weather Service has prepared for us to understand the significance of each storm. So when a thunderstorm intensifies to a specific level, it gets classified as a severe thunderstorm, defined as follows. A thunderstorm that is capable of producing wind gusts of 58 miles an hour or more, and or producing hail of 1 inch in diameter or larger. So when a severe thunderstorm warning is issued, it's time to keep a close eye on the weather and be prepared to take the appropriate action.
Well, coming up after the break, WFXR meteorologist Gary Boyer takes a look at flooding issues unique to the region, and meteorologist Sandra Brogan takes a look at one of nature's most spectacular phenomenon, lightning.
But first, we have a trivia question for you. What classifies a storm as a severe storm? 58-mile-an-hour gusts or higher, tornado possible, 1 inch diameter hail or larger, or lightning, or all of the above, or some of the above. The answer when we come back. Welcome back, everyone, to Safety in the Storm. So here is the answer. What classifies a storm as severe? Well, the answer is A and C. 58-mile-an-hour gusts or higher, and 1 inch diameter hail or larger. How about that? All right, well, Southwest Virginia knows all about the dangers of flooding. Now, parts of the region sit basically in a bowl, meaning that most of the rain flows off the hills and down into the valleys below.
Well, WFXR's meteorologist Gary Boyer takes a look at what makes flooding so common here in the Commonwealth and what makes it common here in our region as well.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about what causes flooding here in Western Virginia. There's several different aspects over the course of the next little bit that we're going to be talking about, including the garden variety thunderstorms that really just don't seem to move all that much. More on that here in just a little bit. But a bigger concern for us, especially more of a widespread aspect to where we live here in Western Virginia, is our topography. We'll zoom into the Roanoke area and you can see off to our north and off to our west, we've got mountain ranges here that produce different elevation changes. Now what happens is when we do get rain showers or thunderstorms or just fronts that come into the area that drop a decent amount of rain, especially in some of these higher elevations, what ultimately happens to it? Well, gravity will gradually take its course, and the rain that falls at those higher elevations will ultimately wind down into the lower elevations. And since the Roanoke region is pretty much in a bit of a bowl, this is where a lot of that mountain water will ultimately collect itself into our area creeks and streams and rivers, and basically the lowest elevations of the region will typically see flooding. And, when you look at the downtown area, downtown Roanoke, that is some of the lower elevations into the Roanoke area. So we do tend to see quite a bit of flooding into the downtown region, which again, we're going to talk about here in a little bit. But as far as our topography goes, when it rains at higher elevations, that rainwater ultimately finds its way into the lower regions, which of course is where we live for the most part. And that does result in areas of flooding in and around the Roanoke region. Not only is topographical flooding a problem, but so too are your everyday garden variety thunderstorms. Remember last year when we had that flooding in downtown Roanoke? That happened on August 19th, and that was courtesy of a thunderstorm that stayed put over the downtown area and hardly moved for over an hour. If you lived outside of the downtown area, you might not have seen a drop. But when a storm doesn't move, it can drop localized heavy rainfall amounts in a very short period of time, which overwhelms drainage systems, resulting in flash flooding. Now let's look at terminology. A flash flood occurs very quickly with little to no warning. River flooding is usually something that happens over time because of our topography, which I talked about earlier. Flooding can happen in any weather system, even in winter. If heavy snow is followed by quick warming, rapid snowmelt can occur, which also results in flooding. It's best to remember these tips. If you're driving, don't cross a flooded roadway if you cannot clearly see the surface of the road. Most vehicles can begin to float in as little as 1 foot of water. Here's something else to remember: the difference between a flood watch and a flood warning. A flood watch means that conditions are favorable that may result in flooding. A flood warning means that flooding is either imminent or is already occurring, and it's time to take action by seeking higher ground. Knowing this terminology now could help save your life down the road.
Well, one of the most impressive aspects of any storm is lightning. It's beautiful. The vivid light show can be fun to watch from a safe distance, but if you're out in the elements, you need to be prepared.
Yeah, meteorologist Sandra Brogan takes a look at what makes these storms so spectacular and so dangerous.
Lightning lights up the sky, signaling a storm is nearby. It can also inspire many to try to capture that well-timed image of a lightning strike. It can also be deadly. On average, across the United States, 25 people are killed each year after being struck by lightning. Now, we typically see the most thunderstorms during the summer months, and here's a look at how lightning forms. Warm air rises, cools, and condenses, forming a cloud. Eventually, the cloud will grow tall enough to produce a storm. Inside the cloud, water droplets and ice particles caught up in the turbulent updrafts and downdrafts within the cloud bump into one another, generating friction. This causes the particles to become electrically charged. Both positive and negative particles are found floating inside the cloud. In time, the positively charged particles collect at the top of the cloud, as well as along the surface or ground, with the negatively charged ones towards the base of the cloud. The charged particles are attracted to other particles of an opposite charge, positive to negative and negative to positive. Because of this attraction, a path can be created through the air between the oppositely charged particles, and when the path is completed, a sudden burst of a high voltage electrical discharge occurs, a lightning bolt. These lightning bolts can occur inside the cloud, from one cloud to another, and from the cloud to the ground. Strikes can even generate from the anvil of the cloud to the ground. These are the most deadly. Did you know that one lightning bolt is 50,000 degrees, which is 5 times hotter than the surface of the sun? The immense and sudden heat of a strike leads to a rapid expansion of air along the bolt's path. This is immediately followed by the air collapsing back in, thus creating the sound wave we hear as thunder. And because the speed of light is faster than the speed of sound, you can count the number of seconds between the flash of lightning and the boom of thunder that follows. Divide this number by 5, and this tells you how many miles away you are from the storm. Remember, if you can hear thunder, you're close enough to be hit by lightning, so when thunder roars, go indoors. Also, lightning tends to strike the tallest object in any open space, so shielding yourself from the rain of a storm under a tree is not a good idea. You also want to avoid open fields and ridges because you do not want your own body to be the tallest object in an open space either.
That's some solid advice there, Sandra. Well, coming up next, most folks here in Southwest Virginia know all about thunder and lightning. But another thing that we need to keep an eye on is tornadoes and what you can do to stay safe as they spin up.
But first, it's time for another weather trivia question. Let's see if you were paying attention. True or false, a lightning bolt is hotter than the sun? The answer coming up next. You're watching Safety in the Storm. Welcome back, and we're back to that weather trivia question. So, true or false? Lightning is hotter than the surface of the sun? Well, the answer is true. The surface of the sun is only 10,000 degrees, while lightning hits 50,000 degrees.
That's right. And were you paying attention? Because that was in the package.
It was.
Yeah. All right. Well, when most people think of severe weather, their thoughts go to dark skies and swirling clouds and strong winds. All of these can be used to describe tornadoes.
Now, tornadoes are some of the most unpredictable weather here in the United States and in Virginia, and that's what makes it so dangerous. Well, Virginia sees about around 11 twisters each year, and most of them happen during tornado season, which is between the months of April and September.
That's right. So I took a look at what causes these storms and what you can do to protect yourself if you're in the path. Tornadoes. Violent, rotating columns of air that are capable of demolishing just about anything in its path. As opposed to straight-line winds that push or knock things down, a tornado literally picks things up and relocates them randomly, away from the spinning cyclone. They seem to appear out of nowhere, and there is no mistaking the damage that's been caused. Last year, an outbreak of tornadoes destroyed a large portion of Kentucky, Missouri, Arkansas, and Tennessee in early December. Catastrophic damage from these long-track twisters was historic. Now, although we are not known for tornadoes here in Virginia, we do get our fair share. Last year, associated with the remnants of Hurricane Ida, 2 tornadoes were spawned in Montgomery County. Both were categorized as EF1s and did some minor damage to the region. No fatalities or injuries were reported, but the wedge was visible from Virginia Tech, a campus where thousands of students reside. But how are these megastorms possible? How can we prepare for them? Well, the science of tornadic development is very complicated, but here is one illustration of tornado formation. Well, first and foremost, what you have to have is opposing wind flows, one at the surface and the other high in the sky, each moving in opposite directions. As these opposing wind fields get closer and closer together, something happens. A horizontally rotating column of air develops at the surface. This column is then introduced to very strong updrafts of wind that pull the horizontal spinning air into a violently vertically spinning cyclone, a tornado. So what can you do to protect yourself in the event of a tornado? If you're alerted about one, here are some of the things you need to do. Get into a sturdy structure, away from windows, and get into a basement, or better yet, a tornado shelter. Cover yourself with a mattress, a pillow, anything that will protect you from flying debris. Grab a helmet, and for afterwards, make sure you have hard-soled shoes, as the debris field will be sharp and dangerous to walk around in. Now, if you don't have a basement, get to the lowest floor of your residence, away from all windows. Put as much of the house in between you and the storm outside. Get into a bathtub, and again, grab a mattress or pillow to protect yourself from debris. Make sure you still have that helmet. Here's an illustration that'll help you understand what we're talking about. Get down into the basement, get up against the wall, and cover yourself and stay safe. If you don't have a basement, get into the middle of the house, highlighted here in red. Cover yourself, get into the tub, and make sure you have your cell phone that'll help you communicate with the outside world if tragedy strikes. And don't forget to download the WFXR News app. Stay safe, informed, and secure until you hear the all clear.
Well, it's definitely a scary thing when you're in one of those storms when it starts to spin up.
Yeah, it's got to be a frightening experience.
Definitely, but you can be sure we have you covered when it comes to staying safe.
Yeah, that is true. Because of how unpredictable these storms can be, putting a plan in place is the most important thing that you can do. but where do you start? And we have items here that really will help you get going. And oftentimes when we do severe weather coverage, we say, this is what you need, but we're going to show you what goes on. So what do you have there, Kat?
So some of the more long-term stuff, whether it be maybe we're looking at the chance for flooding in the forecast, one thing, or even if, power outages are possible, you want to make sure you have those non-perishable food items as one thing to make sure that you're, keeping yourself energized and such. And also, a lot of people, when they think of non-perishable food items, they think of canned food. So it's also really important in the sense that you have that can opener as well, so that you don't kind of get, stuck in a bad situation where you can't open some of those cans. Yeah,
it's a little rough. It's a little rugged stuff. And you also have to keep your documents handy,
Definitely.
too. You want to have all the documents that you could need in case of any kind of issue with medical or whatever would arise. And also, as the storm is coming, you want to be prepared with a safety kit. And that involves a helmet, which, believe it or not, will really protect you, because most of the time in tornadoes, a lot of the damage comes from flying debris. So you want to make sure that you keep your head safe. Hard-soled shoes, we talk about that a lot, because after the storm moves through, there's a lot of debris and nails and such that could get through your foot. So you want to have your hard-soled shoes. We also have the opportunity here for us to give you a minor first aid kit. You want to stay safe with that. Of course, you have some water to go with your perishable foods or non-perishable foods. And these are definitely not in short supply anymore. But you want to keep this mainly for dust and stuff that's floating around in the sky. And what else do you have?
And this one, very important right here. This is a National Weather Service weather radio. This will give you all the alerts when it comes to severe weather as well. So definitely something to keep on hand. You can get a battery operated one, so that will keep you informed even if the power goes out.
And of course your cell phone, and keep your cell phone charged, and download the WFXR News app.
Of course. So that's just some of the things that you may need, but let's continue on with safety in the storm. Coming up after the break, a lot of people remember the devastating derecho of June 2012. Ahead of the 10th anniversary, I take a look back at the event and explain exactly what a derecho is.
But first, what state has the most tornadoes on average each year? Is it Texas, Arkansas, any of the states that are involved in Tornado Alley? The answer coming up after the break. Welcome back, everyone. Here is the answer to the trivia question. What state sees the most tornadoes each year? Well, if you guessed Texas, you were right. The old Lone Star State gets 155 tornadoes on average, and a lot of those are down along the coastal areas. But still, it's a very large state and right in the heart of Tornado Alley. Now, one of the most uncommon storms for us to see here in Virginia, and more specifically Southwest Virginia, is a derecho, a line of straight line winds that are most common in the Midwestern United States.
And that's just made one June night so surprising 10 years ago. We're talking about the derecho that hit Southwest Virginia and is still well remembered to this day.
Virginia is no stranger to the powerful force of derechos. On June 29, 2012, a storm complex began to form near Chicago during the afternoon. Hot and humid air in place across the mid-Atlantic helped to fuel this storm as it became a derecho. Between 8 and 9:30 that night, Southwest and Central Virginia were dealing with winds between 70 and 90 miles per hour. Numerous trees and power lines were down by the strong winds. More than 1 million people were without power in Virginia for several days, impacting cell service and 911 communications. Several people were injured after the wind damaged roofing and other structures. 5 people died in Virginia as a direct result of the derecho. This included a firefighter who was responding to the Boone's Mill area. By definition, a derecho is a widespread, long-lived windstorm that produces damaging straight-line winds. It's usually associated with a band of quick-moving showers and storms. These systems can generate gusts 58 miles per hour or greater and track over a path length of at least 250 miles. Typically, derechos take on a bowing shape. This occurs when scattered storms form in a moist environment. These storms become more linear and severe in nature. The winds behind these storms become stronger than the winds ahead of it, and the backside winds will gust ahead of the storms, resulting in a bow echo. While meteorologists can forecast potential severe weather outbreaks a few days in advance, predicting a derecho more than 12 hours ahead of time can be challenging. It all boils down to small-scale factors within different storm cells. Whenever there is a threat for severe weather in the forecast, it's best to stay alert and prepared, whether it's a derecho or a severe thunderstorm capable of producing damaging winds.
Storms like this are extremely scary, but they don't have to be if you have a plan already made. You can be ahead of the game when you hear the first warning.
Exactly, and if you want to get those warnings first, you can download the WFXR News app to stay weather aware.
And thank you so much for joining us here on Safety in the Storm. You want to stay alert and stay safe.